Number 12, the Citadel. Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak's premier map is an absolute Goliath of a hunting ground, which contains some of my favorite art direction in the game, and handles having multiple biomes pretty damn well. The Citadel certainly gets a lot of ambition points, but what issues there are is why this one's only at number 12. The Citadel features a ruined castle town built off to the side of an alpine forest at the foot of a snow-covered mountain range, and incorporates all three of these regions into its battle zones. This is probably the most fun map to explore in Rise, and makes excellent use of the game's want for you to go outside of the traditional paths and fight arenas to explore the stuff in between. There's a moat to run along, a sewer system to delve into, an old mine shaft to descend, ruined remains of an old settlement to walk around, scattered towers along the mountainside, and castle walls to run up to. If you're a big fan of how Rise handles its locale design and implements the wirebug system into traversal, I think the Citadel is going to be one of your all-time favorite locales in this series. I think the Citadel also establishes an incredible atmosphere. The scattered and disheveled ruins of the old lonely settlements now overrun by nature and powerful monsters creates this feeling of an ancient tragedy, whilst the power of nature overrules the strength of man. There is a persistent sense of hostility at the Citadel that feels very fitting for a Master Rank exclusive map. There also exists a soft, fantastical element to the place that doesn't divorce itself too much from Monster Hunter's more grounded tendencies. The ruined main citadel stands as the nest of the vampiric Malzeno. This, combined with the dense, dangerous forests and wind-swept snowy mountains and ominous purple glow from the moon at night, creates this kind of dark fairy tale feel that helps the Citadel stand out. It can be a hauntingly gorgeous map to just stop and look at. For instance, once you leave base camp, your camera is perfectly angled to see a beautiful shot of the old ruined castle against the towering mountains in the background. I do have a few minor criticisms about the art direction though. For one, though I adore the dark whimsy of the map's atmosphere, holy crap, this map gets really, really purple at night. Like, noticeably, obnoxiously purple. I get the vibe it's going for, but sometimes the lighting feels a little too fantasy-esque, especially when it's reflecting off of all the snow and ice. The other issue I have with the color here is kind of ironic, actually. I think the green is a tad too lush and beautiful in a couple places. The grass and the trees here look great, undoubtedly, especially considering the fact that Rise dropped the ball pretty bad in the color department when it came to its more forest dedicated maps. The Shrine Ruins and Flooded Forest are stuck with pretty uncharitable gray, brown, green mush color palettes. Alternatively, the greens for the Citadel look great, almost a little too green and saturated though. The forest sections here are a few dozen feet away from snowy mountain regions, and they look maybe just like a little too green for that kind of proximity. What I can say positively about the forest or snow sections of this map is the gradual transition between the two. The more southern part of the map has a lot of bright green, and then gradually the trees will start to have less and less leaves. The grass clusters will start to get smaller and further apart. Eventually the grass and dirt starts to give way more to stone with a little bit of moss mixed in. Then the small piles of snow start to form. The grass patches start to look a little bit more dead, and then you get to the areas where the zone turns into just full-on ice and snow completely. The slow process of the biomes changing across the battle zones from south to north is pretty sick to observe, honestly. It may not be super realistic distance-wise, but I think the execution is rather well done considering the limitations of Monster Hunter map size. Gameplay-wise, the Citadel is also very solid. In terms of interactable elements, it has a few destructible towers, trees containing poisonous fluids that can be poured over the battlefield, a few areas with some good vertical ledges to play around with, and a very unique sap-filled swamp that can extend the time that a knockdown monster stays on the ground. I also definitely enjoy the majority of the battle zones that the map has to offer. 14 and 17 are tight and intimate boss arenas that the Elder Dragons frequent. They have just enough space to be fun to fight in, while also being a teeny bit claustrophobic, which results in some really tense duels between you and the bigger, faster elders. Areas like 2, 4, 8, 10, and 13 are nice and spacious, with some of them containing the interactable hazards I talked about earlier. Area 5 has some fun verticality to play around with. Area 1 can be a pretty cool scenic place to battle since you have the silhouette of the castle as a backdrop for whatever you're facing. There's also an appreciated spiderweb of connecting pathways that makes map traversal incredibly easy and efficient. There are, however, a few zones that I don't love. 6 feels like a midsection in a hallway that was just fattened up a little bit to make a pretty unimpressive battle zone. 3 has a wall jutting in at a harsh angle that can make it kind of annoying to deal with if you have your back facing to it. Despite the massive size of this map though, the vast majority of its combat zones do see regular usage, which is always appreciated. This is absolutely due to the gargantuan roster of monsters that can be found here. Now, this map's potential bestiary is another point of mild contention for me. The Citadel region is kind of marketed as this hyper-competitive area that's home to particularly powerful monsters. So they stuck in an absolute ton of just higher tier bosses in this map. What this does is make the Citadel a tad less interesting than other maps in terms of wildlife due to the fact that it lacks the more structured hierarchy of animals that 5th generation Monster Hunter maps usually pride themselves on. Also, there's a few monsters here like Volvodon, Blood Orange Bishaten, and Pyrarachna that just feel absolutely out of place here. I have no idea what they're doing on this map. So, since this is a battleground of absolute powerhouses, what that does mean is that many of the absolute best fights in Sunbreak can be waged here, and you're typically just gonna have a lot of fun fighting at the Citadel because of that fact. My point is that the Citadel can sometimes be a little bit reduced to the Elder Dragon and Flagship map. And the only other thing I'd have to say about the Citadel is that I kind of wish the castle ruin part of the map had a few more destructible castle town elements in the actual battle zones, and that the majority of the buildings weren't just sequestered behind walls that the monsters couldn't access. It could be really fun to destroy an old ruined town in a battle with a Malzeno or something like that. Might have been a bit beyond the expansion scope though, I don't know. The Citadel is one of the most ambitious maps that Monster Hunter has ever had, and I think its execution is flawed, but commendable. The majority of it is fun to fight on, it is a blast to explore, it has a huge roster of excellent fights, it makes effective use of its gargantuan size, and I think it handles its 3 biomes rather well. I do think the monster roster is a tad top-heavy, I think there's a little bit oversaturation, and there's a couple of zones I don't love, but I am overall impressed with the results here. You find yourself on the Citadel a lot in Sunbreak, and that was almost never something to complain about.